Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to break down something pretty wild, an escape from a remote island, using nothing but trash, grit, and some serious teamwork. Right from the jump, the stakes were just sky high. We're not talking about your average YouTube challenge here. No, this was a real deal survival test against the Pacific Ocean itself. And really, that's the core question they wanted to answer. So let's dig into their journey, because when you see how close they got, it's just unbelievable. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Before they could even dream of hitting the water, they had to face a pretty harsh reality. This massive, massive gap between what they wanted to do and what they could actually do. And I mean, just look at this contrast. It's pretty crazy. You've got this goal that would make even a pro sailor sweat. And then you've got this team, a bunch of friends who, when asked if they'd ever sailed, just said, nope. So, when you look at what they were starting with, it was not a lot. Zero sailing experience, no boat, obviously, a limited supply of water. Their one and only ace in the hole was this guy, Haas, who said he'd kind of built one of these before, kinda. And right away, Haze, their one expert, he just lays it all out on the table. He knew this wasn't just about how hard they could paddle, no. This was going to be a fight against something way, way bigger than them. So the big question is, how do you go from literally nothing to a boat that actually has a chance? Well, this is where things get really clever. They didn't just jump into building the real thing. It was this whole process, right? They started small, with a little tiny model to make sure the idea even worked. Then they scaled it up, and believe me, every single step was its own mountain to climb. This whole idea they had, repurposed survival, was everything. It was the core of the whole plan. Think about it. They said any sealed container they found was like finding gold. They were literally turning ocean trash into their lifeline. It's kind of poetic, right? But wow, the build was just brutal. They weren't just building a boat. They were fighting the island itself. We're talking about heat so bad it gave them tunnel vision, finding poisonous spiders in their camp, not to mention just being completely, utterly exhausted, day in and day out. And then there was this one moment. This turning point. They put the frame in the water for the first time, and it floated. And in that second, you could just see the shift. That feeling of doubt just evaporated. For the first time, you can hear it in their voice. They're thinking, wait a minute, we can actually do this. Okay, so the boat's built. Now comes the real test, the final boss, an 11-hour odyssey on the open ocean, where every bit of their hard work is on the line. And this journey was a total roller coaster, an absolute marathon. They have a great start, using the tide to their advantage. But then bam, 2 hours in, stuff starts breaking. Fast forward to hour 6, and they're just broken, physically and mentally spent. They get a little boost of hope later with a tide shift, but it turns out that was just the calm before the final storm. And you have to remember, as time goes on, their team is just falling apart. By the end, we're talking about almost half the crew being totally out of commission, too sick, too tired. The whole escape plan is now resting on the shoulders of just a couple of people who can still paddle. Imagine that. After all those hours of just grinding, of paddling until your arms feel like they're going to fall off, you look up, and the island is still just this tiny little speck. That's a whole other level of mental toughness right there. But they just did not quit. They kept digging deep. And finally, they hit that last mile. Now they can see it, they can taste it. And that feeling, that hope, just electrifies the whole crew, even the ones who are completely worn out. Half a mile. I mean, they are painfully close. One of them even says he thinks they could swim it from there. It's that moment where you think, okay, this is it. It's in the bag. There's no way they don't make it now. But right there, at the very end, the universe just decides to change the rules. It's no longer about how hard you can push. Something else takes over. That's it. That's the moment the ocean, which had been their ally for a while, just turns on them. And with a force they just couldn't fight. So in the end, this wasn't about a lack of willpower. They didn't give up. They just ran out of time. They literally said if they had been just 20 minutes faster, they would have made it. 20 minutes. It's heartbreaking. And this chart really shows you what happened. You've got human effort, which is totally maxed out. They're giving it literally everything they have. But then you have the force of nature, and it's just off the charts. It's overpowering. They didn't lose because they quit. They lost because they were completely outmatched by the ocean. Just listen to that. Can you even imagine? Building a boat from garbage, paddling for almost 12 straight hours, only to have it all snatched away from you at the very last second. It's just devastating. Which kind of leaves you with this one big question, right? When you're in a situation this extreme, what's the real difference between failing and just being stopped? They didn't give up. The ocean literally pushed them back. So, did they fail? Or did they just find the absolute limit of what's humanly possible against the power of nature?